In the darkness of night, the sky flashed, radars went wild, and a silence louder than bombs spread across countries. Iran and the Houthis didn't just launch missiles, they sent out a signal, a message no one could ignore, and one you need to understand. What if everything you thought about who holds power, who gives orders, and who controls the world was wrong? What if those who were always seen as the weak ones just showed they're not hiding anymore? They're striking. This is not only about armies or politics, it's about a shift in power happening right in front of us, from rising oil prices to changing global partnerships, from financial shocks to growing diplomatic strain. Everything is moving, and by the time you reach the end, you'll see why leaders are worried, why millions are anxious, and why this attack might be the moment that changes the whole picture. Don't turn away, don't skip this part, because once you truly see what this means, your view of the world will never be the same. The launch of 65 missiles and many drones was not a random outburst. It was a warning to the entire world. It was loud and clear. Iran and the Houthis are no longer just trying to defend themselves. They're making daring moves, redrawing lines, and shaking things most thought were untouchable. This was more than just a show of strength. It was about belief. These weren't just flying machines. They were strong messages built in steel, fire, and precision. The size, the timing, the teamwork, it all sent a simple message. This was a carefully planned act, meant to be seen by everyone. A stage warning that made every country stop and rethink. Iran has long positioned itself as a central figure in the resistance, but this attack, this detailed joint effort with the Houthis, went far beyond helping friends or answering threats. It was a display of power and control. It was Iran stepping into a role many wished it never would, a powerful regional actor shaping events across continents. And by working with the Houthis, a group once brushed aside, Iran showed its reach goes farther and runs deeper than most expected. The missiles weren't just aimed at Israel, though they were the main focus. They were also aimed at the powerful cities of Washington, London, Brussels, Riyadh, and beyond. The message was plain: we can strike, we will strike, and when we do, it'll be accurate, thoughtful, and hard to stop. Iran no longer accepts being backed into a corner through pressure or sanctions. The time for begging is over. They aren't asking for a seat at the table anymore. They're flipping the table and designing a new one. But this wasn't just for political leaders. Everyday people heard it too. The ones who feel left out, ignored, or pushed down. Many saw this moment as a sign that resistance is still alive. The powerful systems can still be challenged, and that those who suffer under occupation or injustice are not forgotten. Someone is willing to take a big risk while the rest of the world remains quiet. This was more than destruction. It was meaning. Not just payback, but a shift in thought and space. A major change, not just in battle zones, but in people's thinking. And this change won't be undone. People saw the missiles go up, but what followed wasn't chaos, it was quiet. A strange kind of silence where world leaders rushed behind closed doors to try and understand it without showing their fear. The truth is, the West didn't expect this. Not because they didn't know something was coming, but because they never thought Iran and the Houthis could pull off something so well planned, so sharp and so public. This wasn't in their script. They didn't understand how deeply those blamed for everything had been holding back, waiting and preparing for a response crafted over many years. For a long time, the Western world believed it was in full control: military, politics, money. But this single moment cracked that belief, even if only for a while. And what shocked them even more than the attack itself was the silence afterward. Where were the quick statements, the urgent headlines, the angry speeches from the usual leaders? That silence wasn't peace, it was fear hidden beneath calm. It showed that the world's most powerful nations were unsure of how to respond. Because if they admit it was serious, they accept that the balance of power is shifting. If they downplay it, they risk looking blind. Either way, they lose, and they know it. That silence said more than any press release. It showed that the rules are changing, that those who once shouted orders are now having to listen, that those who ran the game are now being challenged. This didn't just highlight Israel's weakness, it exposed how unsure the West has become. For years, they've tried to isolate, punish, and break Iran. But now, the walls meant to trap Iran are broken. And those who built those walls are watching something strong walk out, something they can't stop. The real concern isn't the missiles, it's the chain reaction this event could begin. A change in thinking, a rise in belief, a complete shift in the story people accept. Those once called radicals or enemies are now being seen by many as smart and skilled. And that's what really frightens global powers, not the damage done, but the idea behind it, that those who were kept quiet now have a voice. That those who are beaten down have found a rhythm, and it's getting stronger, spreading through regions, ideas, and hearts. The quiet from Western powers isn't an accident. It's a carefully chosen pause. But inside that calm is deep concern, because they now realize that the game they've played for decades has taken a turn they hoped would never come. The teamwork between Iran and the Houthis wasn't something that happened overnight. It was built over years of shared knowledge, trust, and belief in a united purpose. The missiles and drones weren't just about anger, they were a dream long shared, finally put into action. Iran has always seen itself as a leader in the movement many call the resistance. And the Houthis, growing stronger and smarter, are no longer just followers. They are now a part of a serious force that pushes back against Western control in the region. This strike proved that the image of unorganized fighters is outdated. These are now sharp, trained groups moving with one purpose and perfect timing. What makes them powerful is not just their weapons, it's their thinking. Picking the right time, targeting carefully, using drones and missiles together. It shows they truly understand modern warfare. This is smart, flexible strength. While countries like Israel and its friends pour billions into defenses, Iran and the Houthis focus on being unexpected. Their tools aren't only for hitting targets, they're for showing strength, making people nervous, and reminding the world they cannot be ignored. This partnership also shows something bigger, unity and purpose. The Middle East is often seen as broken and divided, but this moment proves that shared belief can connect different lands, cultures, and even languages. This wasn't Iran giving orders to Yemen, it was a real agreement, showing that both are in the same struggle, that each success adds to the other, that their strength grows by standing together. They also sent a warning to their enemies and to global powers. The old method of splitting groups apart to make them weaker may no longer work. And beyond just the fighting, this teamwork changes the way people think. It gives the poor, the ignored, and the Muslim world an example of organized resistance, that it can be smart, focused, and effective. It breaks the old idea that resistance is messy and out of control. It brings a new image, one of bravery, careful planning, and powerful decisions. That's what scares the powerful, not just the harm done, but what could come next. A new story rising from old pain. Iran and the Houthis didn't just cooperate on an attack. They showed the world that when two sides share the same dream and move with patience and careful steps, they can shape history. And no advanced defense system can stop that kind of wave. The way big media outlets reacted or chose not to tells us a lot about who decides what stories we hear. When dozens of drones and 65 missiles were sent toward a country backed by the United States, it should have been headline news everywhere, but instead of big reports, there was a pause, a silence that didn't come from not knowing, but from a choice. Large media in the West are closely tied to political plans. They know which stories to highlight and which to bury. If they told the full truth, that this was a powerful, well-planned attack by countries often seen as enemies, it would break the stories they've told for years. This wasn't just about avoiding panic or protecting peace talks. It was about holding up the idea that they're still in control. As if people truly understood what just happened, they might start questioning everything else, turning curiosity or sympathy into support for Iran or the Houthis. That was too much of a risk. They couldn't let people start asking how a group labeled as rebels or fighters managed to carry out such a smart and well-organized attack. They couldn't allow viewers to begin questioning who the real aggressor is. So that's the problem with truth. It spreads. And when it spreads, it frees people. So the media decided to stay silent. They chose to downplay, to shift attention, and to cover up what happened by showing stories about celebrities, markets, or pointless gossip. But people aren't blind anymore. Thanks to the internet, brave journalists, and eyewitnesses on the ground, cracks have appeared in the wall of controlled storytelling. More and more people across the world are noticing the double standards, how missiles from one side are described as self-defense, while the other sides are labeled terror, how occupation is called security, but fighting back is called extremism. This unfairness is waking people up. It's pushing them to seek truth elsewhere, to question the media that once shaped their view of the world, and when that trust breaks, it's very hard to fix. The truth is, the media's silence was louder than any headline. It showed how scared they are of regular people learning the truth, scared that people will stop believing the made-up stories about what's right and wrong, scared that public feeling might change, scared that their power to control the narrative is fading. Because if people really understand what just happened, if they realize that these attacks weren't wild acts of madness, but clear responses to years of injustice, then public opinion shifts. And today, public opinion holds real power. That's why the silence means so much. It's not only about what wasn't said, it's also about what they didn't want people to realize. That those called attackers might actually be fighting for something real, that those called enemies might be the ones waking people up, and for those who created and run the current system, that's their worst fear. Another important part of this growing conflict is the massive economic effect after the missile and drone strikes, especially the sudden increase in oil prices. Oil has always been more than fuel. It's a source of control, a political weapon, and a survival line for many nations. When Iran and the Houthis carried out their strikes on Israel, it wasn't just the destruction that shocked people, it was what the act symbolized: danger in one of the world's most vital oil areas. Within hours, oil prices jumped, investors grew nervous, supply chains had to shift, countries relying on oil from the Gulf had to prepare for trouble. For everyday people, that only means one thing: life just got more expensive. But this wasn't only about the attacks, it was about the message behind them. Iran and its allies showed they can hit where it hurts most. Not just military sites or pride, but the global economy itself. When oil becomes more expensive, everything else follows. Travel, food, production, costs rise all around. That gives Iran a strong edge. Now, it's not just about having warships or satellites. It's about who can shake the world economy with one move. This is a new type of warfare, one where power is shown through economic shock, not only through military force. This moment also exposed how weak and deeply connected the world economy is. A single strike in the Middle East can now affect daily life in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. It's no longer just theory, it just became real life. Oil traders are no longer only watching OPEC, they're also watching the skies above Tehran and Sana'a. Iran reminded the world that oil, peace, and price are tied closely to its actions. This situation also damaged the image of the West's untouchable economic system. For a long time, strong countries thought they had full control over world trade, using sanctions and money pressure as their tools. But Iran flipped that idea. It proved that pressure can go both ways. Those who were once hurt by sanctions can now create shockwaves too. It's a new warning, one that tells even the strongest nations to think twice. This rise in oil prices isn't just a short-term spike, it's a sign of what might come next, a taste of the kind of trouble we could face if tensions grow. It shows that Iran and its partners, even without huge armies, can still cause serious disruption with a single move. The oil shock wasn't an accident, it was intentional, and now millions of people around the world are feeling the effects of a missile that didn't just hit a building, it struck at the heart of the global economy. Another powerful part of this moment is the mental and political impact, especially the fear and confusion felt by top leaders. When Iran and the Houthis launched 65 missiles and many drones at Israel, it wasn't just about physical damage. It shattered a long-standing idea among Western leaders that smaller nations would never dare to push back so strongly. That idea is gone now. It turns out the ones long considered silent or too weak are now ready and able to fight back. They didn't ask for permission, they made their own choice, and this act brought a new kind of fear. Fear of losing control, of breaking old alliances, and of not being able to explain world events anymore. Suddenly, emergency meetings were held, troops were moved, intelligence services scrambled to understand the deeper meaning behind the strike's timing and planning, because the real message wasn't only in the weapons. It was in the bold decision, the careful planning, and the courage behind it. What scared the powerful most was this thought: if Iran and its allies can do this now, what might they do next? That fear of the unknown is what really shakes them. Governments usually plan based on what they expect to happen, but this attack brought in something new: complete unpredictability. And unpredictability is dangerous, not just in wars, but also in business, banking, and diplomacy. It breaks stability, it damages trust, and it forces nations to rethink their plans, their partnerships, and even their core beliefs. What if this kind of response becomes common? What if Iran just gave hope to others who feel oppressed or ignored? What if this is only the start of something much bigger? There's also a deep emotional impact when a country like Iran, long punished and blamed, suddenly proves it has real power without using a large army. It shakes the old powers. It sends a signal that strength today comes from courage, not fear, and that bravery spreads. Other countries are watching. Justice movements are paying attention. The idea of full control is fading, and fear doesn't lead to calm. It leads to panic, bad decisions, and possible future conflicts. That's the hidden danger, not just what already happened, but what it could set in motion. In a world where public opinion often decides policy and bold actions make headlines, the biggest fear isn't just that Iran attacked, it's that now the world knows they can do it again. The real shock wasn't only the attack, it was the realization that the old world order is no longer guaranteed, that power may now belong to those who were never supposed to have it. What people witnessed wasn't just a military move, it was a moment that could change the future.